The night sky over Darrow's Rest had always been a quiet expanse of deep violet and scattered pinpricks of white. Farmer Jack Rourke, weary from a day of plowing his meager plot of land, wiped sweat from his brow and took a long sip from his tin flask. It was the same old routine. Wake before the twin suns, tend to the crops, argue with the grain processor's faulty interface, and collapse into bed just after sundown. A predictable, steady life. That predictability shattered when the fireball came screaming through the sky. Jack squinted against the sudden blaze that cut across the heavens, its trajectory alarmingly low. The object tore through the atmosphere, leaving a trail of smoke and glowing embers in its wake. A loud, bone-rattling explosion followed as it slammed into the barren fields just beyond his crop perimeter. Jack didn't hesitate. He grabbed his ion rifle. Not that it would do much against something that had just fallen from orbit, and hopped onto his hoverhauler. The machine grumbled beneath him as he sped toward the impact site. His gut churned with apprehension. A rogue asteroid? A military probe gone astray? Or worse, pirates? The air smelled of scorched earth and ionized metal as he approached the smoking crater. The object in the center was not a rock, but a ship, sleek, silver, and bearing a regal insignia he didn't recognize. Its hull was scorched and dented, one wing sheared off entirely. As he crept closer, Jack noticed a hatch hiss open with a reluctant groan, and out stumbled a figure draped in shimmering violet robes. A woman. No, an alien. She was tall, slender, and radiated an air of entitlement that somehow survived the wreckage. Her violet skin gleamed under the light of the moons, and her gossamer white hair framed a delicate, but unmistakably annoyed face. Her golden eyes narrowed as she took in her surroundings, then fell upon Jack. "You," she commanded, voice as sharp as a blade. "Where is your royal reception?" Jack blinked. "Lady, you just fell out of the damn sky." She pursed her lips, clearly unimpressed. "I am Princess Kalyn of the Elthery Dominion," she said haughtily, brushing soot off her pristine sleeves. "And I require immediate assistance." Jack sighed. "Yeah, I figured. Welcome to Darrow's Rest, Your Highness." And just like that, Jack Rourke's quiet life became a whole lot more complicated. Kalyn sat in Jack's modest, one-room farmhouse, nose wrinkled in undisguised distaste. She perched on the edge of a wooden chair, as if prolonged contact with its surface might somehow taint her. "This is beneath me," she muttered, tapping her clawed fingers against the tabletop. Jack, meanwhile, was rationing supplies from his storage unit, trying to determine what could be spared for his unexpected guest. He placed a steaming plate of synth corn mash and roasted root vegetables before her. "There. Food," he said. "Figured you'd be hungry." Kalyn gave it a long, suspicious look before delicately picking up a spoon. She took a hesitant bite, then grimaced. "This is unacceptable," she declared. Jack raised an eyebrow. "You want me to whip up some gourmet imperial cuisine out here in the middle of nowhere? You're lucky I had enough rations for two." Kalyn pushed the plate away. "I demand something better." Jack crossed his arms, exhaling through his nose. "Yeah? And what exactly do you want?" The princess hesitated. For the first time since she'd crash-landed, a flicker of uncertainty passed over her face. "I do not know," she admitted, almost reluctantly. Jack frowned. "You don't know what you want?" Kalyn shifted in her seat, her usual arrogance faltering. "I have had the finest meals in the Dominion, exquisite dishes prepared by dozens of chefs at my command. Yet I have never felt satisfied." Jack leaned against the counter. "Maybe you're not hungry for food, then?" Kalyn shot him a sharp glance, but something in his words made her pause. She looked down at the untouched plate, as if seeing it for the first time. Jack wasn't sure what to make of her. A spoiled imperial princess who had never worked a day in her life, now stranded on a backwater farming colony. She expected luxury, yet something deeper seemed to gnaw at her. Something beyond material wealth. "Well," Jack said, breaking the silence, "if you're gonna stay here, you're gonna have to work for your keep." Kalyn blinked, then laughed. "I beg your pardon?" "I'm not running a damn palace," Jack replied. "You're eating my food, taking up space in my house. Out here, we work." Kalyn's golden eyes flashed with indignation. I am royalty. And I'm a farmer, Jack said, unruffled. And right now, you're just another mouth to feed. Kalyn opened her mouth to protest, but for once, no words came. Jack watched the conflict play out across her features, the sheer absurdity of being asked to contribute, the shock of someone daring to refuse her demands. Then, slowly, reluctantly, she sighed. What exactly do you expect me to do? Jack smirked. Now we're talking. The next morning, Kalyn stood in the dusty fields, arms crossed in displeasure, as Jack handed her a crude manual harvester. This is barbaric, she muttered, eyeing the tool. This is farming, Jack countered. Kalyn sighed dramatically but took the harvester. Under the harsh twin suns, she clumsily hacked at the crops, muttering imperial curses under her breath. Jack watched, half amused, half exasperated, as the once pristine princess struggled with something as simple as harvesting grain. By midday, she was sweating, exhausted, and thoroughly miserable. Jack leaned against the fence, sipping from his flask. Still think it's beneath you? Kalyn shot him a murderous glare, strands of silver hair clinging to her damp forehead. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, something remarkable happened. Despite her aching limbs, Kalyn looked down at her meager harvest, and for the first time, there was no disdain. Jack caught the change in her expression. Feels different when you earn it, huh? Kalyn said nothing, but as she brushed dirt from her hands, a new thought flickered in her mind, one she had never considered before. Was this what fulfillment felt like? Kalyn had never felt true exhaustion before. The days following her forced labor initiation on Jack's farm blurred together in a haze of aching muscles, relentless heat, and stubborn refusal to admit weakness. Every morning, Jack woke her at dawn with a sharp rap on the farmhouse's metal door, and every morning, she dragged herself out of bed, cursing him in 3 different Elthery dialects. The first few days, she had tried to resist. She had demanded, threatened, and even attempted to bribe him into relieving her of these barbaric duties. Jack never budged. Out here, work gets you respect, he had said. You can whine all you want, but if you want me to take you seriously, earn it. And so, Kalyn worked. She struggled to lift the irrigation pipes, her delicate arms trembling under their weight. She stumbled through the rocky fields, her hands blistered from the rough farming tools. But beneath her frustration, something unexpected began to take root. The first time she successfully carried a full load of grain without dropping it, Jack gave a short nod of approval. Not bad, princess. The words sent a strange warmth through her chest. For years, she had been surrounded by flattery, by servants who praised her for merely existing. Yet, those empty words had never felt like this. She had earned that nod. It confused her. She should have hated this place. She should have hated him. But instead, every day, she found herself watching Jack more closely. His easy, practiced movements, his silent resilience, the way he worked without complaint. For the first time in her life, Kalyn wanted to understand someone. One night, after an especially grueling day, Kalyn dragged herself onto the wooden porch, collapsing onto the steps beside Jack. The air was cool, the twin moons casting silver light over the fields. Jack sat in his usual spot, feet propped up, sipping from a flask that smelled of fermented grain alcohol. Kalyn wiped dirt from her cheek. I should hate this. Jack raised an eyebrow. You do a lot of things you shouldn't, huh? She ignored the remark. Instead, she tilted her head back, looking at the expanse of stars above them. I was born on a world with 3 suns, she murmured. The sky was never dark, always glowing, always warm. Jack took another sip. Sounds nice. She shook her head. No, it was too much. Too bright, too exposed. There was nowhere to hide. Her voice softened. Here, it's different. Jack looked at her then, his usual smirk absent. Yeah, it is. For a long moment, they simply sat in silence, watching the stars. Then, in an almost hesitant voice, Kalyn asked, How did you end up here, Jack Rourke? He let out a slow breath. Was born on Earth. Big cities, too many people, not enough quiet. Enlisted young, saw too much war. When I got out, I wanted someplace simple. Someplace I could build with my own hands. Kalyn frowned. And you found it here? He nodded. Yeah. No politics. No armies. Just this. She studied him, her golden eyes gleaming in the dim light. And you are satisfied? Jack met her gaze, something unreadable in his expression. Some days, yeah. Kalyn looked down at her calloused hands, flexing her fingers. I do not know what that feels like. Jack watched her for a moment. Then, to her surprise, he offered the flask. First sip's rough, he warned. Kalyn eyed it suspiciously, then took a tentative drink, and immediately gagged as the liquid burned down her throat. Jack barked out a laugh. Told ya. Kalyn coughed violently, but despite herself, she grinned. For the first time since she had crashed here, she felt something real. The next morning, Jack and Kalyn stood at the edge of the field, watching a massive storm front roll in from the east. Damn it, Jack muttered, arms crossed. If this rain hits too hard, we could lose half the crop. Kalyn, still sore from the previous day, frowned. And what do we do? Jack grabbed a pair of heavy-duty tarps and tossed one at her. We save what we can. Kalyn caught the tarp, narrowing her eyes. You expect me to do manual labor in a storm? Jack grinned. You expect me to believe a princess is afraid of a little rain? Kalyn bristled. I am not afraid. Jack didn't answer. He was already moving. Grumbling, Kalyn followed. The wind howled as they worked side by side, struggling to secure the tarps over the most vulnerable crops. Rain pelted her skin, turning the dirt beneath her feet into slick mud. Every muscle screamed in protest, but she kept going. By the time they finished, Kalyn was soaked, filthy, and furious. But as she turned to Jack, breathless and dripping, she found him grinning at her. What? She snapped. Jack just shook his head. Never thought I'd see the day. Kalyn rolled her eyes. Spare me your country boy wisdom. Jack chuckled, shaking rain from his hair. All right. Come on, let's get inside. As they trudged back toward the farmhouse, Kalyn hesitated. Then, in a voice so soft it was almost lost to the wind, she muttered, It is just Kalyn. Jack stopped. What? She swallowed hard, eyes on the ground. You do not have to call me princess anymore. Jack studied her for a long moment, then gave a slow, knowing nod. All right, Kalyn. The sound of her name, just her name, not her title, felt strangely light. And for the first time in her life, Kalyn wondered if maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong about everything. Kalyn was not meant to be here. She knew that. Jack's world was small, rough, and honest. Hers had been vast, decadent, and full of empty words. The two should never have mixed. And yet, she was starting to belong here. But the universe had other plans. It happened 3 days later. The night sky shattered with light, and a deep, reverberating hum filled the air. Jack and Kalyn stood outside the farmhouse, staring as a colossal silver ship descended from the sky, its engines humming with unmistakable elthery technology. Kalyn's blood turned to ice. Jack frowned. Friends of yours? Kalyn's hands clenched. Not exactly. The ship landed in the fields, crushing a portion of the crops they had worked so hard to save. A sleek black shuttle detached from its hull, gliding toward them like a predator. The moment it touched the ground, a squad of heavily armed elthery soldiers stepped out, their gleaming violet armor unmistakable. And leading them, a figure Kalyn knew all too well. Her heart pounded. Kalyn, the man said, his voice smooth, sharp, and dangerous. It was Commander Zelvirith, and he had come to take her back. The air between them crackled with tension. Kalyn's breath came shallow as she faced Commander Zelvirith, her former guardian, now standing before her in the full regalia of the elthery Imperial Guard. His sleek obsidian armor, lined with veins of pulsating violet energy, reflected the dim moonlight. Zel had always been ruthlessly efficient, a man who wielded loyalty like a weapon. His silver hair was cropped short, his piercing golden eyes the same as hers. But where Kalyn's were filled with unease, his burned with purpose. Jack, standing beside her, kept one hand near his belt, where his ion pistol rested. He didn't reach for it, but he didn't need to. His stance was enough to signal he wouldn't hesitate if things went south. Kalyn's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Zell," she said, her formal tone betraying none of the storm inside her. "What are you doing here?" Zell tilted his head slightly. "Is that truly the first question you wish to ask, Princess?" His gaze flicked to Jack, scanning him like one might assess an insect. "Or perhaps I should be asking why you are here, in this squalor, among farmers." Jack exhaled through his nose. "You're standing on my land, stranger. Either say what you came to say, or start walking." Zell barely spared him a glance. "Silence, human." Jack's fingers twitched. Kalyn immediately stepped forward, placing a warning hand on Jack's arm. "Enough," she snapped. Her voice was sharper than she intended, but it had the desired effect. Both men halted, though Jack's jaw remained tight. Zell folded his hands behind his back, his demeanor as coldly polite as ever. "The Dominion has searched for you for weeks," he said. "Your disappearance has thrown the Imperial Court into disorder. I have been sent to retrieve you." Kalyn's stomach twisted. "Retrieve me," she echoed. Zell nodded. "Your father, the Emperor, is patient. But patience has its limits." His gaze darkened. "You have already tested them." Kalyn's pulse quickened. She had known this moment would come. From the moment she had crash-landed here, she had always been living on borrowed time. But she hadn't expected it to feel so suffocating. Jack, standing beside her, let out a slow, measured breath. "Seems to me she's not in much of a hurry to go." Zell's golden eyes flicked to Jack again, this time with undisguised disdain. "This does not concern you, human." Jack's expression hardened. "See, that's where you're wrong. She's been working my fields, eating my food, sleeping under my roof. And where I come from, that makes her my guest." His voice was calm, but the edge in it was unmistakable. "So yeah, it concerns me." Kalyn saw the slight tightening of Zell's jaw. Annoyance. Jack had just done something no one in the Dominion would ever dare. He had spoken to an Elthery commander as an equal. Kalyn's heart pounded. She should have corrected Jack, should have reminded him that he didn't understand the dangers of defying the Dominion. But some part of her didn't want to. Zell exhaled through his nose, the barest trace of irritation slipping through his carefully controlled demeanor. "Princess," he said, pointedly ignoring Jack, "come with us. Your father will be forgiving if you return willingly." Kalyn's hands clenched into fists. The air felt heavy, the decision pressing down on her. She had never been given a choice before. Not when she was born into the Dominion. Not when she was trained in courtly etiquette, political strategy, and the art of command. But here, in this strange, simple place, she had worked, struggled, and earned something she never had before. Respect, purpose, herself. The thought sent a rush of fear and exhilaration through her veins. She looked at Zell, looked at Jack. Then, in a voice steady as steel, she said, "No." The silence that followed was absolute. Zell blinked once, as if he had misheard. Jack, to his credit, barely reacted. His only response was a slow, approving nod. Zell's posture stiffened. "You do not understand the weight of what you are saying." "I do," Kalyn said. Her heartbeat was thunder in her ears, but she didn't let it show. "For the first time in my life, I do." Zell's face remained unreadable, but his fingers twitched slightly at his sides, a tell she had learned to recognize over years of political negotiations. This was not the outcome he had expected. "You cannot stay here," he said, his voice colder now. "This place is beneath you. These people are beneath you." Kalyn's jaw tightened. "No, that is what we were taught to believe. That does not make it true." Zell's expression darkened. The guards behind him tensed slightly, as if awaiting an order. Jack's hand drifted closer to his pistol. A storm was coming, and Kalyn wasn't sure if she would survive it. The tension in the air felt ready to snap. Zell studied Kalyn, his golden eyes flickering with something close to disappointment. "I hoped," he said, almost to himself, "that your time among these primitives would be a mere indulgence, a moment of rebellion before you came to your senses." Kalyn didn't flinch. Maybe I have come to my senses. Zell sighed, as if her defiance was nothing more than an inconvenience. I did not wish for this to be difficult, he said. Then he turned to the guards. Restrain her. The soldiers moved forward. Jack didn't hesitate. His ion pistol was out in an instant, the blue glow of the charge illuminating his face. I wouldn't do that if I were you. The Elthery soldiers froze. Their weapons were far more advanced, but Jack was faster. Zell's comm mask finally cracked. Do not be foolish, he warned. This is not your fight. Jack's grip on the pistol didn't waver. That's where you're wrong. Kalyn's heart pounded. This was escalating too fast. If this turned into a fight, Jack wouldn't stand a chance against Imperial weapons. The soldiers wouldn't hesitate to burn this farm to the ground. And she couldn't let that happen. Before anyone could react, Kalyn stepped forward, placing herself between Jack and Zell. I will not go back, she said, her voice unwavering. And if you try to take me by force, she met Zell's eyes, letting him see the absolute certainty in hers. Then you will have a war. The wind howled through the fields. For the first time in her life, Kalyn was not afraid. And Zell knew it. He studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, his lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. Very well. Kalyn's breath caught. What? Zell turned away, signaling his men to stand down. This battle is not mine to fight, he said smoothly. But know this, princess. His golden eyes gleamed as he stepped back onto the shuttle. Your father will not accept your answer as easily as I have. And with that, the Elthery ship lifted into the sky, leaving Kalyn with the sudden, gut-wrenching realization. This was only the beginning. The sky was still glowing from the heat of the departing Elthery ship, its hum fading into the vast emptiness of space. Kalyn stood rigid in the middle of the trampled field, her pulse a slow drumbeat of disbelief. Zell had left, but not in surrender. No, he had left because he knew something she didn't, because he was giving her time to reconsider. A courtesy her father would not extend when the full weight of the Dominion came crashing down. Jack holstered his pistol with deliberate calm, but his jaw was tight. His shoulders squared like a man who had just stared down a predator and lived. Well, he muttered after a long silence, that was a thing. Kalyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It was, she admitted, her voice quieter than she liked. Jack turned to her. You okay? She wasn't. Everything felt wrong, as if she had just crossed an invisible line that could never be uncrossed, as if she had stepped off a ledge, only now realizing how far she had to fall. But she couldn't let him see that, so she forced her chin up. I am fine. Jack gave her a look, one of those frustratingly knowing glances that told her he didn't believe a damn word of it. He drawled. Sure you are. Kalyn bristled. I do not require your pity. Jack snorted. Good, 'cause I wasn't offering any. He turned back toward the farmhouse, shaking his head. Come on. You look like you could use a drink. Kalyn hesitated. For a second, she almost said no. But then she realized she didn't want to be alone with her thoughts. So she followed. The small wooden table in Jack's kitchen was cluttered with half-empty glasses and a nearly finished bottle of grain whiskey. Kalyn had stopped drinking after the first few sips. Her body still wasn't used to the burn of alcohol, but Jack had kept pouring. Not enough to be drunk, just enough to take the edge off. The silence between them had settled into something comfortable. Then, Jack finally spoke. So, you really mean to stay? Kalyn's fingers traced the rim of her glass. Yes. Jack studied her. Even knowing they'll come back? They will, she admitted. And they will not come alone. Jack exhaled slowly. Hell of a risk you're taking. Kalyn met his gaze. Do you regret helping me? Jack didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, considering her with those clear, sharp eyes. The kind that had seen too much and yet somehow still held room for something more. Then, finally, he said, Nah. Kalyn blinked. No? Jack shook his head. Ain't my style to regret doing the right thing. A strange, unfamiliar warmth settled in her chest. Jack didn't see himself as a hero. He was just a man with a quiet life, doing what he thought was right. And yet, Yet he had stood beside her, defended her, and he didn't regret it. Kalyn looked away. You are a fool. Jack just chuckled. Yeah, been called worse. For a long moment, they sat in silence. Then, Kalyn spoke the thought that had been gnawing at her since Zell left. My father will send his fleet. Jack's expression didn't change, but his grip on the glass tightened slightly. How big we talkin'? Kalyn exhaled. A full battalion at least. And if I refuse to go willingly, her voice dropped, then they will burn this colony to the ground. Jack didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Then I guess we gotta make sure that doesn't happen. Kalyn frowned. You do not seem particularly concerned. Jack smirked. Because you ain't thinking like a farmer, princess. Kalyn crossed her arms. Enlighten me. Jack tapped his fingers against the wood. See, when a storm's comin', you don't run. You prepare. You reinforce what you got. Make sure you've got enough to hold out till it passes. Kalyn narrowed her eyes. You think this is something we can simply weather? Jack shrugged. Depends. You ever heard of guerrilla warfare? Kalyn frowned. I am familiar with the concept. Jack leaned back. Good. 'Cause if they come here looking for a fight, we ain't gonna fight him fair. Kalyn stared at him. The man had no warships, no army, no advanced weaponry, and yet, he spoke as if standing against the Dominion was a winnable battle. And the strangest part? She almost believed him. The next morning, Kalyn and Jack stood at the edge of the farm, overlooking the vast plains of Darrow's Rest. Jack pointed to the surrounding ridges, his mind already working through tactics. We used the terrain, he said. Set up traps along the dry ravines, rig the irrigation canals with enough charge to fry their sensors. Kalyn folded her arms. You think this will slow them? Jack smirked. It ain't about winning. It's about making it too much damn trouble for them to keep coming. Kalyn considered this. In the Dominion, war was fought with overwhelming force. Entire fleets deployed to crush a single dissenting system. But this was a different kind of battle. One not fought with brute strength, but patience, wit, and careful positioning. And for the first time in her life, Kalyn realized that maybe, just maybe, the Dominion wasn't as invincible as it wanted the galaxy to believe. Jack turned to her. Think you can handle that fancy Imperial tech of yours? Kalyn lifted her chin. I am a trained strategist. If you? Kalyn lifted her chin. I am a trained strategist. If you give me access to what little primitive technology you have, I can create something effective. Jack smirked at her condescending tone, but didn't comment. Instead, he gestured toward his small workshop, a dusty shack filled with old machinery, scavenged parts, and a few pieces of black market tech he'd acquired over the years. Make yourself useful then, he said, but don't go blowing us all to hell. Kalyn rolled her eyes. I make no promises. As Jack walked off to reinforce the perimeter sensors, Kalyn stepped into the workshop and surveyed the mess. The Dominion's warships operated with perfect efficiency. Every machine meticulously maintained, every piece of tech state-of-the-art. But here, technology was worn, patched, and repurposed. Jack's equipment was a mix of old Terran military surplus, outdated agrimech components, and whatever scrap tech he'd been able to salvage from passing traders. It was frustrating, but also strangely intriguing. Kalyn ran her fingers over an old hollow interface, her mind already calculating modifications. If the Dominion came with full sensor sweeps, they'd detect any energy signatures long before landing. But if she could disrupt their readings, create an interference pattern that made them blind, yes, that could work. She cracked her knuckles and got to work. Hours passed. The twin suns burned high in the sky before sinking toward the horizon, bathing the land in molten gold. Jack returned to the workshop to find Kalyn hunched over a half-disassembled transmitter, surrounded by a tangled mess of wires and circuit boards. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. So, should I be impressed, or should I be worried? Kalyn didn't look up. Both. Jack chuckled. That bad, huh? Kalyn sighed and turned toward him, wiping grease-stained fingers on the hem of her tunic. Your equipment is ancient, inefficient, and barely functional. Jack raised an eyebrow. And Kalyn smirked. And I made it work anyway. She gestured toward a hollow display, where a pulse frequency pattern flickered in soft blue light. I reprogrammed your field sensors to emit a continuous low-frequency distortion signal, she explained. To a standard L3 warship, this will look like nothing more than background radiation. Jack's brows furrowed. So they won't see us? They'll see the land, the crops, the structures, Kalyn said, but they won't see anything moving. As far as their scanners are concerned, this place is dead. Jack let out a low whistle. Damn. Kalyn folded her arms, clearly pleased with herself. But Jack wasn't finished. That buys us time, sure. But if they land anyway? Kalyn hesitated. She had avoided thinking about that part, because if the Dominion landed, then this wouldn't be a clever strategy game anymore. It would be war. Jack studied her expression and nodded as if reading her thoughts. Yeah, he said. Thought so. She hated that he saw through her so easily. But before she could respond, a loud beep sounded from the perimeter alarm. Jack tensed. Shit. Kalyn's heart pounded. Are they back? Jack checked the monitor feed. A grainy, low-resolution image flickered to life, showing movement along the western fence line. Not L3 soldiers. Something else. Jack narrowed his eyes. Pirates. Kalyn frowned. Pirates? Jack grabbed his rifle. This land ain't just mine, princess. It's on the edge of a whole damn lawless sector. If word's gotten out that some fancy Imperials crash-landed here, he slung his rifle over his shoulder. Then we just painted a damn target on our backs. Kalyn's stomach tightened. The Dominion wasn't the only enemy out there. And now? Now, the wolves were circling. Jack and Kalyn crouched behind a low ridge, peering down at the figures approaching the outer fence. 5 men. They were clad in patchwork armor, their weapons a mismatched mix of plasma rifles, slug throwers, and makeshift blades. One of them, a grizzled, one-eyed brute, carried a stolen Dominion pulse carbine strapped to his back. Jack muttered under his breath. Bastards must have been Tylin Zell's ship. Kalyn swallowed. If they had tracked the L3 warship, that meant more would come. The leader of the group, a scarred man with a cybernetic jaw, stepped forward and pounded a fist against the metal fence gate. Hey, farmer, he called, his voice a harsh rasp. We know you're out there, and we know you're hiding something valuable. Kalyn stiffened. Jack barely moved, eyes still locked on the pirates. Ain't got time for this, he muttered. The pirate leader let out a low chuckle. See, thing is, we're reasonable folk. We don't want trouble. We just want... His gaze swept over the farm, then landed directly on Kalyn's position. A trade. Kalyn's blood went cold. Jack exhaled sharply, tightening his grip on his rifle. Yeah, he muttered. Kind of figured. Kalyn's pulse pounded. She had expected an attack from the Dominion. But this was something else entirely. Jack turned to her, voice low and steady. You ready for this, princess? Kalyn's breath was shaky, but she forced herself to straighten. I was born for war, she said. Jack smirked. Then let's show these bastards they picked the wrong farm. The pirates never saw the trap coming. Jack had spent years fortifying this land, preparing for the day when trouble would come knocking. As soon as the lead pirate stepped forward, Kalyn hit the remote trigger, and the ground beneath them erupted in a controlled EMP pulse, frying their weapons instantly. What the hell? The leader snarled, his rifle shorting out in his hands. Jack moved fast. 2 quick shots, one into the knee of the closest pirate, the other knocking the carbine clean out of the leader's grip. Kalyn followed, drawing a stolen L3 blade from her belt. It wasn't her usual royal dueling saber, but it would do. The pirates, now disarmed and furious, lunged forward with brute force, but Jack and Kalyn fought with precision. Kalyn dodged a wild swing, bringing the butt of her blade into a pirate's gut before pivoting to slice a shallow cut along his leg. Jack, moving like a man who had been in far too many brawls, took another down with a sharp elbow to the throat. Within moments, the remaining 2 pirates were on the ground, alive, but defeated. Jack stepped over one of them, pressing his boot against the leader's chest. Now, Jack said, cocking his rifle, you want to tell me why the hell you thought this was a good idea? The pirate leader spat blood, scowling. Words out. About her. Kalyn's breath caught. Jack's expression darkened. Who else knows? The pirate grinned. Everyone. Kalyn's stomach dropped. They weren't just fighting the Dominion now. They were fighting the whole damn galaxy. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Everyone knows. Kalyn felt the weight of it press against her chest, cold and relentless. Jack muttered a curse under his breath and pressed his boot harder against the pirate leader's chest. That's so? His tone was deceptively light, but his eyes were sharp. The pirate grinned through bloodied teeth. The Dominion, the bounty hunters, the warlords in the outer systems, even the Syndicate. He coughed. They all want her. His gaze flicked to Kalyn. And they won't stop coming. Jack didn't move for a long moment. Then he exhaled sharply, stepping back and lowering his rifle. He turned to Kalyn, his voice even. We can't stay here. She already knew that. Her time at Darrow's Rest had never been permanent, not really. But she had let herself believe, for just a moment, that this place could be hers. That she could choose a life beyond the Dominion's reach. She had been wrong. They will burn this colony, she said. It wasn't a question. Jack nodded. Yeah, unless we make damn sure they can't. Kalyn looked back toward the small farmhouse, the field she had worked, the sky she had come to love. Then, with a deep breath, she made her choice. We make our stand, she said, but on our terms. Jack's smirk was sharp. That's what I like to hear. And so, they prepared for war. When the first wave came, they weren't ready. Not entirely. The Dominion had sent dropships first, scouting vessels meant to clear the way for the main fleet. But the pirates, bounty hunters, and mercenaries had gotten there first, all vying to be the one to claim the fugitive princess. Jack and Kalyn fought with everything they had. The EMP field kept the Dominion's sensors blind long enough for Jack to lead the first wave of attackers into his minefields, a network of ion charges rigged beneath the dry riverbeds. Kalyn, armed with her stolen L3 blade and Jack's modified plasma rifle, moved through the fight like a storm, quick, brutal, and utterly merciless. She had been raised as a ruler, a tactician, and a duelist. But today, she fought as something else entirely. She fought as someone who refused to be owned. By the time the first wave of enemies fell, Kalyn was breathing hard, her hands stained with sweat and blood, some of it her own. Jack leaned against a broken fence post, wiping dirt from his face. That all you got, princess? Kalyn gave him a sharp smile, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Hardly. Then the Dominion fleet arrived. The sky split open as the first of the Imperial warships descended. Unlike the pirates and mercenaries, the Dominion did not come in chaos. They came with precision. Zelvirith led the charge. His voice echoed through the comm system, projected across the battlefield. Princess Kalyn, surrender now, and this colony will be spared. Kalyn's heart pounded. She knew Zel well enough to hear the lie beneath the words. The Dominion never left loose ends. If she surrendered, Darrow's Rest would burn anyway, as a warning to others. Jack turned to her. What's the call? Kalyn's jaw tightened. She activated the comm system and stepped forward, her voice cutting through the battlefield like a blade. This is not your Dominion, Zel. This is my home now. A pause. Then Zel's voice came, colder than before. So be it. The final battle began. The Dominion's forces were unstoppable. Even with Kalyn's tactical prowess and Jack's ruthless ingenuity, they were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. Jack fought like a man with nothing to lose, moving through the wreckage of his farm with a grim, determined rage. Kalyn stood at his side, her blade flashing under the twin suns, her every movement a rejection of the empire that had shaped her. And still, it wasn't enough. Zel descended onto the battlefield himself, his golden eyes filled with disappointment. You could have ruled, he said, advancing toward Kalyn as she wiped blood from her face. You could have been great. Kalyn lifted her chin. I chose something greater. Zel sighed. Then you leave me no choice. He lunged. Their blades clashed, sending sparks into the dust-filled air. Kalyn fought with everything she had, but Zel had been her teacher. He knew her weaknesses. He drove her back, step by step, until she was barely holding her own. Jack, seeing this, moved to help, but was tackled by Dominion soldiers. Kalyn's heart seized. She watched in horror as 3 soldiers pinned Jack down, one of them raising a plasma blade toward his throat. "No!" she screamed. Something inside her snapped. She lashed out, moving faster than she ever had before. Feint, pivot, strike. Zell barely dodged in time. For the first time, he looked surprised. Kalyn didn't hesitate. She drove her blade into his side. Zell gasped, staggering back. His eyes met hers, not in anger, but in understanding. She had won. But at what cost? Zell collapsed to his knees, blood soaking through his armor. The remaining Dominion forces hesitated. Their leader had fallen. Their enemy had not broken. Kalyn took a breath, steadied herself, and spoke the words that would change the galaxy forever. "I am no longer your princess." She raised her blade. "I am Kalyn of Darrow's Rest, and this is where your Dominion dies." Jack, bloody and bruised, grinned from the ground. "Damn, princess, that was a hell of a speech." Kalyn let out a breath, then offered him her hand. "Let's end this." Together, they stood, and together, they fought for their future. The Dominion fell that day, not in a great war, but in one woman's defiance. Word spread across the galaxy of the princess who had turned her back on an empire. Kalyn and Jack left Darrow's Rest behind, taking to the stars as fugitives, as rebels, as something more. They would always be hunted. They would always be outnumbered. But for the first time in her life, Kalyn was free, and that was worth any price.